I want to hear really quickly, a minute maybe, from each of you. Why you're running, but not the motherhood apple pie stuff, but what you bring to the table. This stuff that you can imagine we care about, as we decide by we, the editorial page. That's us, not over here. Okay, in that sense. There's a wall here, right? Of why, what we might care about, what are the issues that you think are important, that might shape why we would want to support one of you. We will support one of you. Don't know who yet. So let's start with you, Mark. And again, just keep it to about a minute, okay?
Well, do you want some bio, a little history quickly, or?
A quick bio is fine,
Okay.
but really sort of quick. What do you bring to the table, so to speak? What in your background makes you, qualifies you or will help you in your job as a council member?
Okay, I have a degree in accounting from Purdue University, MBA in economics, 24-year veteran of the Marine Corps, retired as a decorated officer. I've led hundreds and hundreds of men in combat on 3 different continents, peacetime, wartime, all that. I'm used to getting the mission accomplished and bringing home everybody safe.
Has warfare gotten that bad? Pleasant City Hall is it?
I guess the point is that I've been in pressure situations. I've done okay. So I don't think the pressure in the town is going to be anything compared to it. I'm sure there is some pressure though.
Okay.
I've lived in the Bay Area for 25 years. Been in Pleasanton for 12 years.
What do you do now?
I'm a director of finance. I've worked in finance for the last 25 years at banks and in financial arenas. Very strong in that acumen.
And so what are you doing now? I'm sorry.
I'm a finance director
for
ADP Incorporated in town company.
Right. Okay.
So that's my strength, financial, making sure debits and credits equal, which is a tough thing for government.
Mm-hmm.
I've lived in Pleasanton for 12 years, had 2 kids go through the school system. I have been involved in youth sports. I'm a high school coach right now. I've actually dealt with Tri-Valley Hero a lot, trying to get our athletes in there for some recognition. Been involved in baseball, football, wrestling, PGFL, all that stuff. So I understand the kids.
So the coaching is on the side, kind of.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
I'm certainly not getting rich from it. In fact, it's a negative.
Uh-huh.
I feel I'm an independent voice. Although I am a Republican, I'm more to the center. So I think that's what I have to offer. I'm not one way or the other way. I'm in the center. I'm willing to listen to both sides, come up with creative solutions to the issues that come up. I'm worried about this. The reason why I'm running is I'm worried about this campaign. I'm worried that if we don't elect the right person, we're going to either have a voting block or we're going to have some extreme ideas on the council. I think we need someone that can work with people, and I think we need someone who can stay with their convictions and has an idea what the people want, not what they want. There's got to be transparency in the city council. That's got us in trouble in the past.
Okay, quickly, what policy issues do you bring you to the table?
Well, I believe in controlled growth. We've got to grow as a town or we're going to die. But what I see right now is that we either have the multi-million-dollar homes or we have the low-income homes, okay? How that affects us is, one of the things Pleasanton is known for is the multi-generational families that we have. If you walk around town, you see people that graduate from Amador, Foothill. As these housing prices soar, we're not going to see them anymore. We're going to lose that edge in this town, that feel. So that's something I'm very concerned with. I'm very concerned with senior services.
Tell you what, just give me the issues. We'll go through the details of them.
Okay.
Okay, as we break across, just tell me what are the issues.
Senior services.
Mm-hmm.
I'm concerned with schools. Worried about the budget, proposed budget we're going to have, and how that works with our schools. I'm very familiar with the schools, maybe not the level of Olivia, but pretty close. I'm concerned about, I've driven by that cemetery many times. I'm concerned about that.
Okay. I just need to get your top issues.
And the police and the firefighters and the city employees, concerned about how we handle them.
David.
Sure. So,
go ahead.
yeah, I grew up in small towns, Texas and Arkansas. When I moved out here after graduating University of Texas with my double E degree, Silicon Valley was my dream to come out here where the personal computer revolution happened. So I've been out here for now 22 years working in Silicon Valley. I've worked my way up from engineering into management, and I'm now a senior project manager. I get things done in my company. So I've kind of achieved my career
And what's
goals.
your company?
It's called NVIDIA, the graphics chip company, NVIDIA. NVIDIA.
Okay.
So I've done well from a career perspective. I know how to get things done. Along the way, I met my wife, Laura. She's an immigrant from China. She also grew up in a small town in China, and that means 8 million people in that town. But when I was dating her, I told her about growing up in a small town, and she agreed that we wanted to raise our kids in a small town, so we chose Pleasanton and we moved here because we liked the small town feel. So once we moved out here, I started watching and following our local government and politics, and I started attending city council meetings. And two particular issues caught my attention. One was the pension liability, unfunded pension liability that was going on. I started getting involved in that. I helped the city council understand how important that issue was and helped them come up with some solutions to get a better deal for both the taxpayers and make sure we meet our city obligations to our employees. Also along the way, I got involved in helping to try to maintain our local control, and in particular the One Bay plan that's going on right now throughout the Bay Area. I've been following that closely. I've been speaking out against it at the visioning sessions and even in front of their executive committees when they were presenting that plan. So those are the two main issues. Other things, obviously, I'm a parent. We have 3 kids in PUSD right now. I'm the only candidate with kids in the public school, and when I'm elected, I'll be the only city council member with kids in the public school. So I have other issues as well. I'm sure we can talk about other.
Okay,
as we go
real
on.
quickly,
Yep.
name 2 others that are your issues.
I call it red tape review. That is, I want to start measuring the performance of our school, of our city, like we do for school report cards, things like that. So I want to put some metrics in place.
Okay, what's the other?
Obviously, the education side of things. The city government is not the school board, but there are things in the city government that do impact our schools, such as the growth and safety.
Kathy?
My family and I have lived here almost 17 years. We've raised our 2 daughters here. I'm proud to say the youngest one just graduated from Ohio State and has a job, which was a major accomplishment.
Just graduated from what?
Ohio State.
Okay.
Younger one, swimmer.
Yeah.
She swam all 4 years there. So the last 15 years or so, I got involved in the city, starting with the swim team. And I was president of the board of directors for the Pleasanton Seahawks on 2 different occasions. That led me to be the, if you will, the compromise representative for the Burnell Property Task Force, the Burnell Park Task Force, which led me to be on the, appointed to the Park and Rec Commission, and then I was moved over to the Planning Commission, and along the way I've served on 6 or 7 different task forces, including I'm currently the co-chair of the East Pleasanton Specific Plan. I think what I bring to the party, obviously, is a lot of seasoned civic experience across a wide variety of all kinds of different activities and organizations within the city, and it's reflected in the broad, diverse endorsements that I have, which I'd be happy to share with you, and they're on the website.
Yeah, I can take a look at you guys' websites. I want to know what you're
And then my top issue is fiscal sustainability, and I'm more interested, well, I think we need to continue to focus on the unfunded liability. I think it's more important, we need to now start looking at increasing the city revenues as the economy improves, so that we're ready and able to begin to fund capital improvement projects and get some of the things done that we have not done for the last 4 or 5 years. If we can get the revenues up, then the quality of life kinds of things that include public safety, our parks, our schools and things, will have money to do those things.
So what are your other issues? City revenues, unfunded liability?
And so obviously I want to continue to create parks and open space, and I want to see us get the cemetery greened up. Those would be, I think, my top.
Got it. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Olivia.
Hi, I'm Olivia Sanwong, and I am very much a product of our wonderful community. I moved here in 1981 at the age of 2, And certainly growing up here and going through the public school system here, it really enabled me to go out and explore a world as well as achieve higher education and career success. I really love Pleasanton. My friends would describe me as very passionate about Pleasanton, and certainly this past summer, my husband and I, we purchased our first house here in Pleasanton. We live 1 block from our beloved Pleasanton Arch in downtown Pleasanton, and it's been such a joy to be a downtown resident and also be able to have the opportunity to live near my parents, who are 1.7 miles away from our house. And you know, it's interesting because I have been reading a lot of research about home buying preferences of the millennial generation, and certainly living somewhere that's walkable and near restaurants and entertainment venues is something that's really important to millennials. But millennials also want to live near their parents. And so as I was reading this article, I realized that they were talking exactly about me. And in terms of the urban versus suburban, millennials pretty much are split. So some millennials want to be in the urban city centers, and others actually do want to be in a suburban community. However, when these home buyers do go out and look for housing, the traditional suburban housing stock isn't necessarily a match in terms of that walkable community that's near restaurants and entertainment venues. So certainly that's one area that...
So let me ask you, Olivia, what do you bring to the table background-wise?
Sure. My background is in corporate strategy and market research and studying macroeconomic trends. And right now, in terms of economics...
Macroeconomic, you said?
Sure, yes.
Okay, I just want to make sure.
Right now, we're at an inflection point, I believe, in terms of economic theory. Certainly the 21st century is going to be the innovation economy. And what that means is at the center of the innovation economy, you have knowledge, technology, entrepreneurship, and really living in the middle of the high-tech capital of the world, we are at such an advantage to take advantage, to capture this opportunity, and the things that we can do for economic development is important. And I'm certainly working towards this right now. I'm on the city's Economic Vitality Committee. And on this committee, I'm currently chairing a subcommittee that's putting together a report of our economic assets. And with this report, we're focusing on the amenities mix that Pleasanton has to offer to businesses and the employees of those businesses. And that's something that's really important in terms of trying to capture our portion of the pie of this innovation economy. But there's other things too that come with that. Again, having this integrative community where you have jobs and housing and transportation opportunities, as well as education and entertainment and restaurants all mixed together.
Okay, so let me ask you, background, corporate strategy,
Yes.
macroeconomic, what do you actually do?
Market research and strategic reporting, project
For
management.
whom?
Right now I'm working as an independent consultant, mainly running surveys and analyzing data. I most recently worked for Autodesk in the market intelligence department, and before that Forrester Research, which is a market research firm.
And what are your issues?
Certainly economic development is important. Also, when thinking about economic development, I want to make sure we continue to
You
keep...
just give me the tick of the
Yeah.
issues, and then we'll come back and expand on it.
So I want to make sure we keep Pleasanton ahead of the curve.
Okay.
And so with that, also making sure that we hold on to the cultural values that we hold dear to our hearts, certainly in Pleasanton, our community, as the other candidates have shared, it's something that's really important here, so to not lose sight of that. And then also representation. Certainly when I look at the current mix of our city council, I do see a lack of representation in terms of demographics, and that's something that I will bring to the table.
Okay. And what else? Those are your issues? Economic development and representation?
Sure, and then also having a housing mix that appeals to all generations, specifically younger generations, that we can bring back those who grew up in this community, as well as take advantage of the innovation economy.
Okay, let's use that as a jumping off point.
Sure.
I'll start with you again. We'll work backwards. Give me sort of in about a minute and a half your analysis of what you think the city should do to meet its housing needs and deal with the court settlement with the state.
Great question.
Court order with the state, I should say.
So I know we've already zoned a number of properties, and at least 4 of those properties have some velocity in terms of the development. And with those properties, what we can do going forward is really think about where their location is and how they integrate with the nearby community. And as I mentioned earlier, this integrative concept is something that's really important. So transportation-oriented development, which most of these housing developments that have the velocity are near major transportation hubs, that's key. So whether it's near one of the BART stations or a Wheels bus hub or the ACE train. Also being near jobs, certainly. So you have housing, jobs, transportation. And then also thinking about the retail and entertainment mix is important. And I really like the idea of walkable communities. And certainly when I think about Hacienda, right now the way Hacienda is designed is not designed with the pedestrian in mind, and this is something that we can discuss going forward. Right now, look at something such as lighting. Right now the lighting is designed for the automobile, and there may be a way to redesign Hacienda so that the lighting is more pedestrian friendly. Also the corporate campus structure from the 1970s, 1980s, that's not what businesses want today or what the workforce wants today. Today, modern businesses want to be closer to the sidewalk, so to have an entryway from the sidewalk and maybe a parking structure in the back or off to the side. And so thinking about some of those different design options, I think is really important, and how that integrates with the workforce housing. Certainly if you go to Hacienda today, you see a lot of people who live in Hacienda Park and walk across the street to work. And I think we're just gonna have more and more of that as we start to meet our housing numbers.
Yeah.
Okay, so I assume you're talking about the RENA numbers when
The
you're talking about
RENA
housing
numbers,
and
the
court.
court settlement.
Okay.
Or court order.
Yeah, court order.
And how.
Okay, I just want to clarify in the
Right,
RENA.
right.
So I served on the Housing Element Task Force that went through the process of identifying properties that could be rezoned for the 30 units to the acre to satisfy the RENA numbers, and I think we had a couple of key things that we looked at or considered overreaching or overarching. One was that they be distributed and balanced as best we could throughout the city so that we didn't have it concentrated necessarily in one location, which was the message that we heard through our public workshops and things. And then we also tried to respect the property owners that whose properties were identified and didn't necessarily want to be rezoned. And combining that with the matrix of services and things that would be near and appropriate for that kind of housing, like transportation, shopping, retail, etc. We came up and we did rezone the 9 properties in time to satisfy the court order. And to date, one of those has been actually approved, was just approved by the Planning Commission. It is what I would consider a very high quality apartment community, complete with about 10,000 square feet of retail right there and lots of amenities. Now going forward, we did that in a very condensed timetable since we were under court order. We need to rezone some more for at the end of 2014 so that we are not zoning, we have our housing element in compliance and we're not zoning by right, which would be, I think, a disaster for the city. So I think that we need to engage the community on some out-of-the-box kinds of thinking on what we want that to look like now that we have some time. And certainly I think the east side is a place where we're going to have some of it. It's just
I got to tell you, I'm tracking with you, and maybe it's just me, but whenever somebody says out of the box, I roll my eyes.
Okay. So let me explain then what I mean by that. So when we did at the task force, because it was so condensed, we just did everything at 30 units to the acre.
Mm-hmm.
We didn't stop and ask ourselves, what would it look like at 40 units to the acre or 50 units to the acre? Or are there some places that say are strip centers that maybe need to be redeveloped, and when they're redeveloped, they could have the housing on the top of it? That's what I mean by asking ourselves, are there some different ways to get it? So I'll take back my out-of-the-box comment.
Okay, that's okay. I just trying to.
Okay, and so on the east side, we're going to have some numbers. We're going to have some of this, some of that housing will satisfy those numbers. I mean, I think it's too early for the task force to be able to say how much. The good thing is for the next RENA cycle, we're only going to need about 4 acres of the 30 units to the acres. So it's going to be a lot easier for us to do and to figure out, what makes sense and everything. So I think that's it in a nutshell, what I would do. But I think the main thing is we need to take advantage of the time and think through what the best strategies and options would be.
David?
Sure. So I have a little bit different take on this. I think we may have lost the battle when it comes to the lawsuit and our forced rezoning, but I don't think we've lost the war. I don't want to go fight that battle again, but I think we still need to keep fighting for Pleasanton's local control. I don't want Pleasanton to become just one district in a one Bay Area regional.
Okay, you think you may have lost the battle.
Decode
all that
in the
for me.
lawsuit, we lost that battle, but I don't think we lost the war when it comes to maintaining local control. Sorry about that. Yeah.
What do you mean by that?
And what I mean is I think we, as local communities in the Tri-Valley area, I think we need to start working together to push back on One Bay Area and Sacramento and let them know that we want to maintain our local planning control.
What is that? What would you do differently?
There's elections coming up in 2 years. We need to raise awareness within our community so that our citizens understand what's going on and outside our community, so that they understand what's going on, and so we can put pressure on the politicians who are being elected.
Okay, so so help me understand from a strict policy perspective, setting aside the politics, what would you do differently then?
Well, let me say what let me bring it back to the local level.
Okay.
So with this rezoning that's happened and forced upon us right now,
Mhm.
I want to make sure that the development pays for itself and it's not passed on to our taxpayers. So if we're going to be forced to take on these the high density housing, then I want to make sure it pays for itself and it's not becoming a burden on our community and our taxpayers. That especially when it comes to infrastructure and things like that. And on top of that, it's going to bring in a lot more students into our school district, and I don't know how our Pleasanton school district is going to be able to accommodate all those students. That's a big question. But the point is, we are losing more and more local control, and it will continue forever until we no longer need a city council if we don't stand up to it.
Mark?
Okay, I don't see, and people will say there is, I don't see a vision for the town. What is our town supposed to look like? I go down 580, I drive to Livermore, I look at those hills and I say, that's not what we want Pleasanton to look like. And I don't see a vision. People may think there's a vision, but are we holding to that vision? Where do we want our housing at? How do we want it to interact with the surroundings, the hillsides, the different neighborhoods?
Well, let me ask you something, Mark. Aside from the court order changes, you do have a general plan. You do have
With the vision.
Pardon?
With the vision.
I mean, it does exist.
Okay, I understand that, but if you talk to people on the street, they don't see it that way.
Okay, do you have a problem with the way the general plan's laid out?
I think the general plan is fine in itself, but I don't see us applying it. I just don't see it. I see us.
And can you give me specifics?
Well, I mean, a direct example is the thing you were just talking about, the Oak Grove project. I mean, that type of thing. It was put on a hillside. It was modified from this to this. There were exceptions made for it.
Okay. Well, we haven't gotten to the hillside stuff yet. We are coming to that.
Okay.
Okay. I'm trying. I'm trying. Believe me, you guys didn't think we were going to get out of here without PPs and QQs, did you?
Right.
Okay. But in terms of the vision, setting aside whether roads are houses and houses are roads and P's are Q's and Q's are P's. Okay. Is the city not following its general plan?
Well, I think there is a general plan, but is it right? I mean, Olivia touched on this a little bit. What I see is multi-million-dollar homes, and I see the lower-income homes. I don't see the middle ground for people to move into. I don't see our kids have an opportunity to come back to the area and have a chance to
You
live
see the
here.
multi-million and the low-income homes.
Right.
You really in Pleasanton don't see anything in between?
Oh, I see it as existing, but I don't see the growth being there. No, I don't.
Okay. You don't see the growth in terms of
Of new housing and things of
I
that
see what
nature.
you're saying.
I understand there's new apartments, there's new condominiums coming in, there's new complexes, but the ultimate goal of everyone is to own a home. of
Okay.
most people.
Let me start with you, Mark, and we're going to work back quickly. Let's go to the sort of the core question that was sort of raised by the lawsuit, and discuss it a little philosophically for a second. You know, the underlying premise of all that lawsuit was this notion that Pleasanton as a community has a huge job space, relatively speaking, but it wasn't providing enough housing for the people that work there.
Right.
The housing that those people could afford.
Right.
Just in a minute, just discuss that philosophically, where you're coming from and whether that argument has merit or not.
Okay, first of all, the laws are the laws. Once they're put out there, we have to live by them.
Okay, let me
think
put
that
it
we're
this way.
going to
Was that a legitimate concern at that point?
a legitimate concern in
Yeah.
the sense that
That the
the
city
housing has
was-
to match the type of people that work
That the
here.
city, and what was going on, the argument the state made was, you have, Hacienda and all this job expansion, and so what you were doing is you were stimulating a lot of traffic because you weren't providing the housing
Right.
within the same community. Any
Right.
merit to that?
There is merit to it. I mean,
Okay.
we've got businesses in town. It has different levels of economic employees. Some get paid a lot, some get paid in the middle, some get paid at the bottom. And they are residents of Pleasanton, whether they live here or not. And we need to give them the opportunity to live in town. But there's got to be some, rules and restrictions about it in terms of, who can afford what. And it's got to be earned too. So those are the laws. They were put down, and we have to abide by them.
David?
Okay, look, the citizens of Pleasanton voted for a housing cap, 29,000. We estimated what we thought we could grow, how much infrastructure we need to support it, and citizens voted on how we wanted to grow years ago. This lawsuit overturned that. The fact that we were fortunate enough to have a lot of business here, I don't think is a requirement that we have to put in place housing for the people who work here. It's great if it happens. I think it's a good free market thing to let that happen. But I side on the side of the citizens when it comes to this. They voted for the housing cap. The fact that it got overturned really concerns me, and that's just another example of how we've lost local control.
Okay.
Central planning doesn't work.
Kathy?
So I do think that there is some merit to having some housing like this. I'd like to make the comment that these so-called workforce or affordable units, and some people may be earning $60,000 to $80,000. I don't really consider that low income. I consider that entry level, policemen, firemen, etc. My daughter, potentially coming if she chose to come home. Either one of my daughters, if they chose to come home. And I think we talk about we want to have a strong business component to our city, because that's really what fuels the city and the wonderful things that we love. And if you talk to the business folks, they want workforce housing nearby for their employees to live in. It's correct, they can't all afford the $1 million houses. They've got to work their way up, and so I do think there's some merit to having some of this housing. I think the trick of it is that it's distributed, that we distribute it well throughout the city, that we maintain our high architecture standards, that these communities provide the amenities that we expect of Pleasanton, which are things like open space, places for kids to play, recreation rooms, et cetera, so that they can be,
Infrastructure.
thank you, within the communities. They can be communities, and that they're also located near services such as, as I've mentioned, the retail or the transportation, the BART stations.
Okay.
So, yeah,
Olivia?
thank you.
Yes, sure. So certainly traffic's an issue in the greater Bay Area. I believe every year we continually to move up in the traffic rankings, and our commute times become longer and longer to get from where we live to where we work. And here in Pleasanton, a lot of the residents actually work at jobs in Silicon Valley or in San Francisco and have long commute times. And then a lot of the people coming into Pleasanton during the day are coming in from San Joaquin Valley or somewhere else and also have long commutes. And it is important to have housing here for the jobs that are here so that we can cut down on the traffic. Traffic has so many different implications, between the cost of supporting and maintaining the highways to air pollution and other concerns along those lines. Also, again, when we think about businesses certainly want to have the housing for their employees nearby, because then they can attract that type of workforce that is talented and can really help the business thrive. And so that's another important component in terms of having multiple housing options. And then, yes, it's important to have housing options for people who grew up here. It's also important to have housing options for empty nesters. And there's so many people that do want different housing options at different affordability levels.
So what I'm hearing from you is, you do think there was merit in the state
Yes.
position?
Yes, I do think there's merit in the state position.
Okay. So let's talk about our P's and Q's. Olivia,
Yes.
PP a good idea?
Well, it passed and it's been upheld.
That's not what I asked you.
And from my point of view, I want us to move forward on this. Certainly the citizens spoke, and this is what the people of Pleasanton want. And I don't recommend that we continue to fight this. Certainly there are some elements of
Continue to fight what?
fight whether or not we build on Oak Grove, or whether or not we build the Oak Grove development. And I believe that with the latest court ruling, it's up to the owners of Oak Grove to continue the appeal process. And I believe the next step is either the California Supreme Court or one step below. And I don't know if the California Supreme Court has approved that as an option. So where we stand today, certainly there are elements of PP that are unclear or undefined, or the definition's ambiguous. And that's what we have before us. So certainly I know one of the bigger questions right now is a road considered a structure or infrastructure?
Okay, but let me take you to the bigger picture. Was PP a good idea?
Are you saying do we not want to, is it a good idea not to build on the hills? Is that what you're asking me to answer?
PP was pretty specific on what it said. Yeah.
Yes.
Was it something you supported at the time?
So I actually was in business school during the time. I was not in Pleasanton. And so it wasn't something that I was here for. At this point in time, I support it because that's what the voters have voted, and that's what the courts have upheld.
Yeah.
So I have a voting record on this. I voted for the Oak Grove project. I was moved over into the Planning Commission in the middle of that. I went and looked at the 51 homes where they were sited. I walked on the top of the ridge where the trails were going to be, and I thought it was a very fair trade-off for the 500 acres of open, or nearly 500 acres of open space that we were going to get for the 51 homes that I felt were reasonably sited. It's no secret, it was turned over. We had PP.
Turned over. Overturned?
I'm sorry, yeah, referended.
Right.
Sorry. I did not support PP during the campaign. I wanted to go for the QQ option. However, PP is law, and as a planning commissioner, it's no longer about what I think should happen on the hills, it's what the voters said. Now, to some of the ambiguities of it, we just went through them at the Planning Commission and voted. They included things like road as a structure, inventory of the ridge lines, man-made slopes, how do we deal with those? And how do you measure slope, and I think there was one more. It was not.
So what do you see as the message in PP?
The message in the PP is that people want to see the tops, the ridges, the tops of the surrounding hills, free of structures. And that's, I just walked into a bad trap there with roads. But they want to be able to see the natural beauty of the hills. Or the ridges, actually, would be.
And are you good with that at this point?
It doesn't matter what I am, it's.
That's not what I asked you, though. I know it. It does matter to me whether you are.
I am actually good with it at this point. And so as we have an application, Lund Ranch 2, it's been through the Planning Commission once on a workshop. Unfortunately, I was in DC taking care of a sick daughter, and I didn't actually get to sit for that, but we're gonna be seeing that here, I think, shortly. And it's gonna come into.
Before I let you go on this
Okay.
one, okay?
And I wrote as a structure, so that's public record. As I said, I'm the only one here with a voting record.
Okay. At the time of PP and QQ seemed like the council had a long time. It was sort of a day late and a dollar short. How do you defend QQ at that point?
Well, I mean, I wasn't really part of QQ at that point.
I know, but you said you supported QQ.
Well, I supported QQ in the context of definitions and defining things.
But it didn't really define or do
No, it
anything.
ended up not being what I thought,
Yeah.
what I expected. No question about it. And that's partly why we're having trouble now, or we're having to take this time and have these long.
No, PP, what we're going over now is PP. My question to you is,
Well,
how
but-
could you have supported how did you support QQ at the time?
Well, what I'm saying-
editorially, we sort of said, well, this would have been fine maybe if you'd made this promise 10 years ago, but this is basically what you said you were going to do 10 years ago.
Right, I understand.
I mean, how in that time did you defend
So
it?
here's my thing with the PP, what my issue with the PP was, and we're facing it now. When you have, the voter written initiatives, sometimes they're not as clear as they could be or maybe need to be, and I think witness the 2.5 hour discussion we had at the Planning Commission meeting the other night on trying to define some of these terms for PP and agree on them. And so I would rather have seen, more of a definition with community input. I can't say that what the council did was right in not addressing it. I mean, they let it go too long.
We would have preferred to have seen that too.
Right.
But at a certain point, it was fish and cat
That's why
bait.
I'm saying at this point, I'm fine with
Yeah,
PP.
I mean, at
I
that
think,
point, we were saying it was long overdue.
right.
That's what I'm trying to understand. I'm trying to understand from your perspective,
Well,
how in that point in time, 4.5 years ago or whatever it was.
But see, I think
that you thought we should go even longer.
Well,
That's why
but I
I'm
didn't want to go any longer. I mean, I thought frankly that QQ would force the issue and the discussion and the definitions.
There was no time requirement in QQ.
I thought there was,
as I recall.
I think there was actually, because we got into that as part of the discussion with PP. But, and I think as an example, I think even QQ said that they were to do an inventory of ridges, which is now something we're debating on PP. My issue with PP was that you get into things where not everything is clear and defined, and as I said, we're dealing with that now on the Lund Ranch 2 application, and whenever Oak Grove comes through, we'll have that issue then,
Okay.
unless we get it all defined now.
David,
Okay,
your PPs and QQs?
okay. I'm for PP, and here's why. We've always had.
Well, you were for PP,
Well,
I see.
oh, yeah,
Okay,
I support
okay.
PP. All right, our general plan has always had provisions in it to protect hillsides and slopes and things like that, but it was very vague. So we needed to define what we needed to protect and what we weren't going to protect. So from that perspective, I like PP because it defines, it puts it down in writing what the expectations are. There may be aspects of it that people don't or do like about it, but that's what I really, at least we now have, we have it defined for people who want to do things that they can follow. That brought up some issues that we need to address, But my point here, the city has had lots and lots of years to go about defining this stuff, put it in the general plan, and we wouldn't have had to have a PP. So the citizens got frustrated at that delay, and they put their own initiative up, and I support that. That's what citizen initiatives are for. When the government doesn't respond, the citizens can take action. Happy for any follow-ups, but that's my statement.
And he's sticking to it.
That's right. Get some water while I break here.
It's an undue advantage.
Yeah.
Mark.
Well, I definitely support PP. It's what the people want. It's what I want. It's not just about the ridgelines. It's also about the habitats. It's about our trees. It's about a lot of things. 5,000 people wanted PP, okay? QQ to me is about money. How do we avoid litigation? How do we avoid getting sued?
What do you mean it was about money?
Well, I mean, it's costly. It's costly to fight these battles. There's litigation that could arise from it.
QQ is about money, about.
In the essence that it will cost us money.
It would
if we
have.
were- yes.
Okay.
Yes.
It would have cost you money if what?
For litigation. I mean,
For
you know,
litigation
fight-
over the project?
Right.
So you're saying that was a litigation avoidance measure?
Yes, and that's why I don't agree. I didn't agree with QQ. I agree with PP,
I see.
and also, you know, with PP, there's still ends. We need to close these loopholes that that are out there, and it's somewhat done that, I think.
Okay, so is a road a street, or is a road a building,
Structure.
a structure?
A road's a structure because when you look on a hillside, you see a road going up. It sure looks the same.
David, is a road a structure?
A road is not a structure. I don't tell my kids, look both ways before you cross the structure.
Okay. Okay. I
And,
just-
and also on top
I
of
just-
that, if it is a structure, it becomes too easy of a tool for obstructionists to prevent roads from going in anywhere there's a slope.
Olivia, is a road a structure?
Me? No, I consider road infrastructure, and that's actually how we would segment these types of projects at Autodesk. Certainly with construction projects, we would have the different types of projects, and we would have infrastructure as one.
So when I'm hearing a road is a structure, a road is not a structure, right? Do I have that right?
Correct.
I would say a road is infrastructure.
Infrastructure.
Well, I understand that
Okay.
would not be a structure.
Okay,
correct?
sure.
Will it be
Okay.
banned by PP?
Well, wait a minute, PP doesn't ban it unless it's 25% or more.
On 25% slope, is it considered a structure, and therefore it can't be done? That's the question.
That's the question, right?
Yes,
And-
it's not a
And the
structure,
question
it can be
is a road considered a structure under PP, right?
Yes,
Okay, and you say
I voted yes at the planning commission.
and you say no.
No.
Fine, okay. We understand.
It's good to have contracts.
We understand the application after that, but I just wanted to understand, okay. So,
You can imagine what the planning commission meeting was like.
God, I only.
By the way, the city staff recommended it first being a structure, and the city staff has now reversed that, so the city staff says it's not a structure. Minutia, but FYI.
When is a road not a road? That's the question.
When's the one you don't take? Let's take one.
Take the fork in the
This is
road.
this is the only issue in which we've got PPs, QQs, and roads, not structures and structures.
And it's only in Pleasanton.
Yeah.
I bet you get up in the morning just delighted to think about these things.
Okay. So, Mark, give me your sense of what you see as the primary financial challenges to the city.
Well, we've addressed the pension funds for the police department. We've also got to address the pension funds for other organizations.
How have you addressed the pension funds for the police department?
Well, I mean, in terms of getting agreement to pay their fair portion of the pension fund. And it's a tough thing in terms of that because we want to ensure that we have quality service,
Hold on
quality
a
civil
second.
service.
I just want to check something quickly, if you don't mind. Bear with me second. Okay, so, so they're gonna pay their portion of the pension fund, and that to you means,
That to me means that we're similar to other towns that are in the same situation. It's not a matter of, we're giving money to people that's above and beyond what other communities are getting, you know. Nobody's promised you that you work 20 years and your life is gonna be the same exact as it was when you were in your 30s. You're earning the same money. There's a lot of loopholes in there. But it's a complicated issue because you also wanna retain the best employees you can, the best police department. We need a great police
Okay,
department in this town.
so what, so you talked about other employees. What do you think should happen with other employees?
Well, I mean, similar exact things. We need to have pension plans that are reasonable compared to what the market bears.
Okay, we'll come back through this a little bit more. We're gonna explore it, flesh this out a little bit more, but David, your thoughts?
Okay, on the financial side, the pensions are still a big issue. The big elephant in the room right now is two things. We're still on a defined benefit plan, and two, we're under CalPERS, which is not performing, and the unfunded pension liabilities is driving up our personnel costs. A couple of years ago, when I got involved in the issue, it was getting close to 80%. Last couple of years, it's backed off a little bit, which is good.
Well, what's close to 80%?
I'm sorry, the portion of our general budget that we're applying to employee salaries, pensions, and healthcare was close to 80%.
Yeah, it's about 75, right?
Yeah.
Cost of labor. Yeah.
Right. We've taken steps as a city to help address that, but the issue here is if CalPERS doesn't perform, we're gonna stay in this situation and keep digging a hole deeper. And CalPERS last year, performed 0.1% instead of 7.25 projected. We're not out of this yet. We've got to keep our eye on this. And long term, we need to move to something different. I'd love to see a defined contribution plan. I know there's issues with that when it comes to the state and the laws, but we need to continue working that direction. And you guys define contributions like 401ks, things like that.
Kathy?
So on the.
I'm clear on what a DC is.
So, you know, I think pensions are definitely a part of the expense side, but I think the steps the council took to bring them more under control, combined with some of the legislation that the governor passed and went into effect in January, is a real good start towards getting the situation under control. There's the last time the police and the fire contract were renegotiated, they both of those groups stepped up and are now paying, I believe it's 10% of their 9. I think one's 10.
Okay.
Police, I think, is 10. I wouldn't swear to that, but the point is they've gone from 0 to a significant contribution, and the miscellaneous employees are paying.
By the way, what's the employer side of that?
16. I'm not sure about that, but.
That was in the 20s, but I'm not sure.
It's high, it's significantly more.
Just-
The miscellaneous employees contract is under negotiation. You know, they're currently paying 4%. They can go by law up to 8%. So, you know,
Should
obviously.
they?
Yes. Yes, and I would hope that that is something being negotiated. So I think that's a good step with the new retirement for safety at 2 at 57 and the miscellaneous 2 at 67. As we have retirements and bring in new employees, I think that will help it. But for me, you know, obviously we've got to keep some attention on this, but I think it's time to start looking at how we're going to increase the revenues. We're coming out of an economic downturn, and I would hate to see the city miss opportunities to get, you know, to increase the revenues. And for me, it starts in the hacienda
Tell you
business
what,
part.
let's
Okay.
stay on the expenditure side for
Okay.
a while.
I thought you were asking about the whole.
Yeah, let's stay on the expenditure side for a second. We can come back to,
So,
you know, I think we're all for economic development. I've never found a candidate who wasn't.
Yeah.
Okay, and you know, some cities can do it slightly better than others, but on the margins, that's not where you can make the big change as a council member. Would you agree?
Wait, I would agree.
Okay, so let's stay on the expenditure
Okay,
side for right
so
now.
obviously the pensions, and then, you know, we've been with the soft hiring freeze, which, you know, I think we need to continue to have and to be careful, keeping track of the expenditures, because it's a big, you know, it's a big in budget.
Olivia?
Real quick, I would disagree with that statement about economic development, but we can address that later, in terms of city council members having some influence.
They do have some influence, it's just it doesn't move the numbers on the scale that you have to move it and have had to move it in.
Right, but there are things we can do to nurture this.
Absolutely, nobody's debating that right now.
No, okay.
Well, I'm just trying to stay on the expenditure side.
Of course.
Because that's where the big dollar movement
Yes.
is.
Yes, and I'd like for you to repeat the question you asked. Yes, what do we think about the financial stability of Pleasanton?
Give me your financial assessment.
You know, when I look at it overall, we have a AA+ rating as a city, and that's a very good rating. And so we should feel very proud of how well we've managed our finances and our budgets thus far.
Do you think you'll still have a double rating after Moody's re-examines your bonds, as they're going to re-examine everybody's bonds?
I'm going to say yes. Yes.
What are you based on?
Because
I mean, do you know what I'm talking about?
Yes, so
Okay.
they come through. Yes.
I mean, do you know
Because
what Moody's is about to do?
Tell me what you know.
Okay. As we've explained in columns before, you know, Moody's is about to change the way they assess your pension liabilities.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So, while I appreciate that you have a AA rating, that doesn't really go to the issue. Okay? Because that lags behind, and as Moody's themselves says, they need to go back and relook. So, okay. So
do you want me to answer about pensions or just the overall financial health? Because I can, because I'll get to pensions, but overall financial, you know, I really like our business model that we don't take on debt for capital improvements. We have a capital improvement fund, and that's how we pay for large projects, except for the golf course. But then even with the golf course and the golf course debt, the city council recently prioritized paying off the debt to save us $11 million in the long run. And what that does is that gives us $1.4 million around $1.4 million each year that we can use to put towards something like our PERS stabilization fund or something else that we need to use in our budget. And so with our reserves and the fact that we end with discretionary reserves of $25 million in this past fiscal year, I would say that Pleasanton financially is in a healthy position. Now, yes, there is the unfunded pension obligations that we need to address. And I actually prepared a full report on this, so if that's the next question, I'd be happy to share that now, or I'll wait till we
I
get to
don't
that.
want you to pull out any reports.
Okay.
I want to hear it from your mouth.
I know. Well, not a
I
report,
want you
it's
to
my
put
notes.
away your notes.
No.
I want you to
Okay,
give
fine,
me
fine.
your assessment of the, you know, the pension situation.
Sure. So I think that the biggest problem is that when we look at, let me back up. We have a goal of 70% of our operating budget should be allocated to personnel. At one point in time, we were hovering maybe around 80%. Today, we're at about 75%.
It jives with everything I understand.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
And so within that piece of the pie, right now, our pension contribution is somewhere in the range of 30% of payroll. And that's a problem when 30% of payroll is going to pension costs. And so there's three things. I break this down to three things. What we can do locally, what we put in place thus far, and then also how we can work with our state representatives to influence public policy decisions.
Lots of luck there. Go ahead, yeah. Okay. What can you do locally?
Sure, I think one of the most important things is to have a good relationship with the employees, because that's who we're negotiating with, and it's important to understand their concerns. It always makes the negotiation process go a little bit more cordially and smoothly.
Mm-hmm.
And there are different things we can do. For example, the calculation of what the pension benefit is. Do we go with the last year of earnings, or can we negotiate something like last 3 years of earnings or last 5 years of the employee's
That's not
salary?
your discretion.
That's right.
That's no longer in your discretion. For the new employees, it's set by state law. And
No,
the
but it's
old
for
employees,
existing-
For existing, it's vested. Unless you want to be the one to take on the vested rights lawsuit.
City actually contributes 21% to the pension fund.
So, what else can you do locally?
We can also, put money into the PERS rate stabilization fund to help offset
Okay.
the costs. And we
Okay.
have done that the last 2 years, and certainly that might be one option we can do in terms of the golf course decision.
Okay, let's come back to that. You raised a good point there. Okay?
We also can control our operating costs in terms of, again, having that benchmark of 70%.
Okay, let's go to that for a second. What about this notion of paying off the golf course funds? You are going to assume a golf course loan. You are going to free up cash flow over time.
Yes.
Where should that money go?
I'd say in the near term, the PERS rate stabilization fund would be a great idea in terms of where that money could go. It may be something that would be a year by year decision.
Okay, the stabilization fund. Do you see this as making great progress right now?
Yeah, actually, so in here, there's this one page that shows what our funded ratio is, and right now we're for fire somewhere in the 75% range, and our target's 80%. So certainly by contributing to this, that can get us closer to that target.
Do you think that's a good adequate target?
I believe so, yes.
Okay, so you think the 80% is a good target for your funded ratio for PERS?
Yes.
Okay. Kathy, do you think 80% is a good target?
Yes, as a minimum,
As a minimum?
as a minimum.
What do you think is the idea, is the target you want to hit? I mean, I'm not sure
I
what
don't
you mean
have
as a
any-
minimum.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have a set target in mind, but I think we gotta be realistic that, as the market goes up and down, that even if you hit 80% today and the market goes down a little bit, it's gonna go up and down. So that's why I think we'd be better off to shoot a little bit over and still try to be around the 80% even when the market goes down. But I think 80%, is a minimum. Seems like a good place to be.
And where do you think the golf course money, once freed up, should go?
Well, so I have a little different take on this. Right now, first off, I think that we should pay off the golf course debt. But right now, we're subsidizing the golf course operating fund from our general fund. And that's, where some of the savings, we'll get some savings from not having to put that money into the general fund. And the money that we're using to pay off the golf course, we need to pay back whatever replacement fund that is. So I think we're gonna have to set ourselves up on a schedule where we wanna replace or, replenish that fund over, I'm not sure what the right time would be, maybe 10 years. So at least a part of that money each year, I think, needs to go back to the replacement fund where the money came from that was used to pay off the debt. After that, I mean, there's a lot of things that could happen, and I would hate to be pinned down today. Certainly the pension stabilization fund would be one, but I'm ready. I'd like to see the city have a capital improvement program again, and so perhaps some of the money can begin going there as well. But I don't think it's reasonable to ask us today to lock down where that money would go.
Okay, I think I heard 3 questions and I have to answer all 3, but.
Go for it. Answer all 3. You
Sure.
did hear 3 questions.
First of all, I don't understand why the city even owns a golf course, but that's probably another question.
That was not one of the three.
I know. If the money that we get from paying off the golf course, it needs to go back into the essential city services that we have that are being impacted because of the pension situation, which would be infrastructure, the roads, the water, all that kind of stuff. That's what the government's here for, first and foremost, to take care of. But can I address the funding? The
Funded ratio?
Funded ratio.
Please.
Yeah, it should be 100%. And now I understand it's going to fluctuate over time with the market, but the real elephant in the room is that our politicians from years ago have promised these benefits into the future that we're going to have to pay for. So the fact that we're having this defined benefit compensation method gets us into these situations. So while we have to deal with it right now, over time we have to move back to a defined contribution.
Okay.
But is that something we have to go back to the state?
Yeah, we have to figure out with Jerry Brown's help, with the state. I understand there's lots of complications there, but and that's one of the things that Jerry Brown didn't get through.
Okay, so what you're arguing about with him is right now is over DC versus DB, right?
Yeah.
My question, though, that I'm really focused on is the goal of the funded ratio.
Right.
Okay. Okay.
To me, 80% is when you sound the alarm, not where you set a goal. If it starts getting down there.
Now, why would you then say, if that's the case, then why don't you want the golf course money to go into the pension stabilization fund?
Yeah, it's a good point. I could see some of it going there, but I'm not sure how much it's
I
going to
mean,
help.
those seem like inconsistent arguments.
Yeah.
On the one hand, you're saying 100%
Right.
is the goal. On the other hand, you guys ain't anywhere near close to that. So why would you
the
not
problem
want
is
it?
the hole keeps getting dug deeper and deeper, and you put a little bit back in, but the hole's being dug faster than you can put it in.
Well, I understand that. I guess what I'm saying then is I don't understand why you would then argue, taking that perspective, why you would then argue to put the money into other services rather than
Sure.
to paying off.
Well, there's other services that need to be done in the city as well that are suffering because of the lack of the funding. So it's got to go somewhere. Someone has to feel the pain.
Well, if you either make, okay. Mark?
Okay, I agree with David, sell the golf course, first of all. 80% is obviously where we're at, and it's unrealistic to determine that we're gonna be at 100% anytime near, so there's gotta be some kind of plateau level, and increase it a little bit, maybe to 85 as a goal, but it's unrealistic to me that we're gonna get to 100%. What would you do with the money?
My question is, what's the goal?
I would say the goal's 85%. I think that's a reasonable goal, and that's gonna take some time. And what would you do with the money? Okay, obviously, we probably do wanna pay down some of the debt, but I look around and I look at the senior services that we have. I've been to the cemetery a few times. I drive into that cemetery. I'm embarrassed to look to my right and see all the weeds and garbage that's on the side of the road. Even though we have put some money in there, that's something we need to put some money into. We need to put some money into the schools so we have more aides and counselors in there. There's things that we need to put money into that help the citizens in this town. I mean, I like to have nice roads. I like to have new stoplights, but the people in this town need some things too.
I'm not clear on the counselor's idea.
At the high school, aides for the kids, just
Why is that a
administrative.
city function?
I think we can help them with it. I think there's definitely been some help with it. I'd like to see us invest some money in our youth organizations. Maybe a youth, something similar to a town like Concord, where you have a Concord Youth Center.
Okay. Let me ask, and let's start with you, Mark.
I disagree.
You disagree? I haven't even asked you
Always
yet.
I know, just kidding.
And we'll wrap up with this. What's the difference between the golf course debt and the pension debt?
Well, really, debt is debt. I don't know that there's a difference. I mean, what we gotta look at is what are we paying for each one, okay? And what we should be paying off is the one we're paying the most for. Okay, and we need to come up with solutions. And you know, I'm not going to give David credit, but he's right. Why are we in certain businesses that we shouldn't be in, or government?
What's the difference?
The golf course debt was something we went into presumably eyes open. We knew what we'd have to pay back, what the schedule was, how much it would be at the end. The pension debt is open-ended, it's variable, market performs, market doesn't perform, we have to absorb the impact of that. And the people who gave those promises years ago are, you know, they wrote checks that we're now having to pay back. They took it out on credit cards that we're now having to pay back, and you didn't know how much the upper limit would be.
Well, I hate to say it, but I basically agree with David. The golf course debt, I think, is somewhat like a mortgage where, you know, it was set up where you make payments on a schedule where it gets paid down and it doesn't increase as long as you make the payments on time. Whereas the pension situation, it fluctuates with market, with how many employees you have, how much they contribute or don't contribute, and so you can't just say if I pay $1 million extra every year, then I'm going to get it to where I want it to be, because there's so many forces that are moving at it.
Olivia?
Yes, so I agree about the golf course debt in terms of being,
Yeah, just talk to
okay.
me.
In terms of being similar to a mortgage or credit card debt. With the pension debt,
I'm sorry, the golf course debt is what?
similar to a mortgage or credit card debt, if one carries balance on their credit card.
Okay.
In regards to the pension debt, having studied actuarial mathematics, I also know that there's probabilities involved in terms of looking at the actuarial tables and determining the uncertainty of life in terms of you know, mortality rates, and that also is a factor in
That's the least of your problems with the pension.
in regards to the calculation. But it is
That's
part of the
least-
calculation.
That is part of the calculation.
And so
but
when
that
we
is
have-
not- that is not what's driving your unfunded liability. It's a small factor, but that is not what's driving your unfunded liability. But go ahead, yeah.
Yep, and there are some other changes we
But,
can.
but talk about the difference between the two debts, as you were saying, you were starting to say, I just, you know, you said, you know, I mean, if you're gonna say that that you understand the actuarial part of it, that is not what's driving the big problem you have today. It's not the life expectancy. Life expectancy is gonna add some, and it's gonna get worse because CalPERS is about to readjust that. But that's not the biggest, that's a small part of what's driving your pension debt today. Go ahead, yeah.
Right, but that does add a slight modification to looking at the debt versus the golf course debt. The golf course debt doesn't have as many variables in terms of the calculation. It's a bit more straightforward, whereas with the pension debt, there's so many more variables and so many more items that can really determine that size of the debt.
Let me ask, I'm gonna sweep right back through, and you raised it, let me get clarification from each of you on a point that you sort of raised here, Olivia.
Okay.
What does the pension debt, the unfunded liability, represent?
It represents the total cost should we have to pay it out today. So should everyone retire today and want to collect their pension?
For future service, for past service,
Current employees
current employees for future service, for past service?
for past service.
Kathy?
I agree with that.
David?
The unfunded liability is, we're always paying into CalPERS the amount that they say in order to meet the obligation. So the unfunded liability is a projection into the future of how well the fund is performing or not performing against those future debts that we need to pay. And it's a metric that you can look at to see how well we're achieving that. So there's AMA and what is it? ABA and MBA. There's different ways of doing that. So to me, it's a metric on how well the pension is performing. It's not a check that's due instantly right that date.
Well, to me, it's it's what we pay to maintain a system that doesn't work very well, and that's it's not comparative to the business world that we have out there. The market's very volatile. We don't know what it's going to do, and we can impact new people to the system by offering them a different process. But for the ones that we have in the past, we have obligations. And
Okay,
that's
so what does
just
the
the way it is.
unfunded liability represent?
To me, it represents what we owe to maintain what we have for the employees that we have, their retirement system.
On this one, you two are right. It's for the past service. It's the liability for past accrual. Thank you, folks. I appreciate it.